screen is on. There we go. Makes sense.
I apologize.
It's okay.
That one still is blinking red.
I think it's because I turned it
No, you just touched it.
on and then he turned it off.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Are we on Grassroots?
One more section.
Oh, okay. I couldn't tell.
Can you remember what you said?
Good afternoon, everyone. This is our Tuesday, March 5th regular Board of County Commissioners work session. And we're leading off this afternoon with an update on the Health and Human Services discussion with the city. And John Peacock and Dan Sundin are here to present that.
Yeah, thanks, George. And this is just to update the board on where we are at with our discussions. You may recall back in November when we were considering our 2013 budget. Steve, of course you weren't here, but I think you're aware of the discussions that were taking place. At that time, when we had brought forward the nonprofit funding, particularly for health and human services nonprofits, the city at that time had proposed a change in its budget, which was to reduce its funding for health and human service nonprofits. There are two areas that the city had committed to maintain, and that included the senior service funding through our department, as well as future funding for detox. The proposal that the city had put on the table at that time was that the county consider increasing the Healthy Community Fund to make up for that difference. And that precipitated some discussions, and what came of that is that we created a subcommittee with two representatives from the Board of County Commissioners. George was one of those representatives, as well as Rachel. We had two representatives from the City Council, which were Adam Frisch and Steve Skadron. And then we had three representatives from the nonprofit community, Lindsay from the Buddy program, Liz Stark from Community Health, and Marky Butler from Hospice of the Valley. And then there were staff representatives, which included Steve Barwick and Barry Crook from the City of Aspen, and then Nan and myself from the county. And that subcommittee took on a process to see if we could find some recommendations and even some alternatives, consider some alternatives for future funding, nonprofit funding. And we followed a process which was really first to try and identify the mutual interests that the various entities at the table might have, what kind of issues needed to be addressed as we considered potential solutions for each of the entities, and then to use that as a basis to identify and narrow down potential solutions. And so this group's work is not done necessarily, and these recommendations, I think, are a first cut at prioritizing next steps. I don't know at this point that they necessarily represent strong consensus within the group, but they do represent at least consensus about what our next steps should be as the entities sitting at the table. So before I go on to talk about the kinds of solutions that we came up with, are there any questions about the process and what brought us to the table? Okay. Well, we met 4 times, and at our last meeting, we reviewed what we call our solutions matrix, and there are really three types, three different areas, I think, of concern that were addressed with potential solutions. The first one was possible funding solutions. That's what brought us to the table, was should we be increasing a tax or not, and how should we provide for stable funding going into the future. The second was possible decision process solutions. During our discussions, we identified that there was an issue with the entities not really understanding particularly the goals of the city relative to what they'd like to accomplish with this funding, and a disconnect between the process that the county has been administering to make recommendations for how grant dollars should be spent, and whether we had decision makers from the city of Aspen on board. And then there is also, I think, a lot of questions about information that wasn't at the table. So is there the possibility of having some analysis to ensure that the dollars are being used efficiently and effectively in the community? So there's really three categories of funding solutions. I'm sorry, of solutions. Funding solutions being the first one that I want to talk about. There were a number of funding options considered, and as I said, just because something's crossed out, I think really that was a process of narrowing down in order to reach a priority as to what we would agree our next step would be. But some of the possible funding solutions that were considered included what the city's original proposal was, which was to seek an increase to the Healthy Community Fund in 2014 or possibly at our next renewal. There's another opportunity discussed. Currently, most of the sales tax revenue into the municipal general funds is generated through an existing county-wide sales tax. You all adopt a resolution each year allocating, defining the formula for that split. We had talked about the possibility of, what we could do is go back onto the ballot and maybe reallocate some of that 2% sales tax that's already a county-wide revenue source to provide a stable source of funding. The third option, which is highlighted in green, and just so you understand the color coding, the green were the primary areas of next steps. The yellow would be secondary areas for us to look at. What we landed on, in fact, was that municipalities continue to fund nonprofits and determine a fair and equitable process to split the responsibility for that funding. That was the option that seemed like the most feasible and reasonable next step by the participants. So the managers will be having a meeting to follow up on that discussion later this month. The secondary solution that is considered is simply that the city determine what it feels to be a fair and sustainable level of funding for nonprofits and budget accordingly. A couple of other options that were on the table for discussion is that we just continue to fund at our current levels, or that the funding is cut to zero in future years. And so on the funding solutions, we decided one of the I think main concerns is whether the responsibility or load is being shared equitably, particularly among the municipalities in the valley. So we thought a good first step would be to widen that circle and see if there's a model that we could identify.
I think if I could just add one thing, we originally started because the city was talking about reducing significantly Health and Human Services funding, But by the time we acknowledged this, I believe we were talking about community nonprofits and health and human services. So
thank you.
not just targeting health and human services, although that's it's sort of a tenuous agreement from the city. But when you meet with the other jurisdictions, that's what I think we're talking about. All health and human services and community nonprofits, but probably not the arts, because the city has a dedicated tax for arts, and we
Yeah.
don't fund arts.
Thank you. Before I go on to decision process solutions, any questions on where we're at? And again, these are preliminary. These obviously have a lot more discussion ahead of them before any real specific recommendations are developed and potentially adopted. Okay. On the decision process, this was, I think, a pretty interesting discussion. There's really multiple layers to these recommendations, but just to start at the top to show some of the ideas that were considered. And just to step back for the public, right now, the way this works is that the county has a grant review committee that makes funding recommendations both for the Healthy Community Fund and for City of Aspen funding of health and human service nonprofits. And so we have a joint application. The applicants will indicate whether they're asking from both entities or just one of the entities, and then our grant review committee right now makes funding recommendations that are then forwarded to the City of Aspen, and they're either included in the budget and distributed there or not. And it has been the case that the City of Aspen has been using those recommendations from that joint grant review process. So
Up till this year, and they're planning on making grant decisions without our input for 2013.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
They said they were gonna just give what they gave last year, and they weren't gonna take any input from us, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I missed that nuance. So, possible decision process solutions. We talked about, the City of Aspen having its own grant review process and application. That puts more onus on the nonprofit community. We talked about a status quo process. And really where we ended up, if you look at the three areas shaded in green, was having some broader discussions at different levels. One area of concern that was expressed was whether all the entities involved in providing funding for nonprofits really had an overarching set of community goals that we're trying to achieve. And it came to the conclusion that while we have set goals, that the county has set goals, the board has done that both when we adopted the ballot language and also in providing guidance to staff. The other jurisdictions haven't necessarily been involved in that same process, and so there's really not a multi-jurisdictional look. And so one of the solutions that we thought would create a better understanding across the board and possibly change allocations in the future, I don't know, is to really have some process to set an overarching set of goals that the different jurisdictions can buy into. Again, that's going to require us to have discussions with Snowmass Village and Basalt too, to see if they're interested in participating in that kind of process. We also had a discussion about the need for the city to identify specific goals and outcomes it desires for nonprofit funding. In particular, if we are going to continue to provide a joint application process and joint review process, that if we are going to have a dialogue about success, we needed to be able to know where we're supposed to be, helping get outcomes to, and for that we need to understand what the city of Aspen wants to accomplish, and how it wants its budget dollars used. And so we talked about that would be a good and that's really an internal process for the city of Aspen. Then we talked about actually an older solution, which was also having somebody from the city of Aspen as a representative on our grant review committee. Previously, the finance director had participated on that. As there were some changes, I think that connection to the grant review committee went away, and it seemed like maybe there was not a good understanding of the process that we go through to develop and make recommendations, and that could be cured through participation by having somebody from the city of Aspen on the grant review committee. Now, we had crossed off that the city provide a block grant to the county, who determines and does all the contracting with the nonprofits, which is going the opposite direction really of the city of Aspen having a representative on the Healthy Community Fund potentially. But I did receive an email indicating that the city may want to still have that option available on the table. So it's a little bit of a change from where our group discussion was, but just so you know, that's hanging out there. And then I guess any questions on those recommendations at this point? So the analysis solutions, these are probably larger studies that would inform decision-making processes and potentially future funding decisions. One was, and this would inform, I think, the goal setting, but is there some collective impact model that we could agree to or come to and measure the results of the investments that are being made? One thing we do know is we probably need some help to figure out how to develop that kind of model, to develop that kind of tool. It's certainly something that I think the participants from the city of Aspen were interested in, and you know, we agreed to at least explore that further to see if there could be a tool developed. And then the other one is really, are there opportunities? This one kind of got worded, the wording got combined, but it's, could we bring somebody on to help facilitate this broader discussion about equitable distribution of funding responsibilities moving forward, you know, somebody like Healthy Mountain Communities or such. If we're going to have that first discussion, we may need some analysis and some help getting there. The item that's crossed out is actually one, again, I received an email from the city on saying they would like to have that still on the table, which is really, is there an opportunity for us to bring somebody in to see if there's, you know, instead of increasing the pot of money, the funding solutions, are there efficiencies to be had within the nonprofit community, for example, by sharing payroll or sharing back office functions or those sorts of things. That's, you know, it's an option that I think the group discussed would be great, but maybe wasn't a primary step, would maybe be one that came later through the pod. But I think we've received some input that at least the city would still like to have those on the table. So those are the potential solutions, really, that we identified for further discussion and further exploration as a group. Our next step is to have a meeting with staff with myself and the managers from the municipalities to explore, is there potential to develop a fair and equitable model that would determine appropriate funding levels, maybe resulting in IGA, maybe it's more informal than that, and then to get the group back together to discuss the outcome of that and where we go next. In the meantime,
Sorry. I was just going to say, we have a little bit of a deadline, and that is we have a joint application that goes on the web generally in May. And so we're hoping to find out if we're actually going to continue with a joint application in 2014 or start to separate our grant applications. And so we're hoping to, it's sort of like hurry up and slow down. It's hard to get to that point. But I think it speaks to the issue of if the city wants a block grant, but they're significantly decreasing their funding, we're cautious about taking that on because then we're the ones who make the cuts. And we already are quite clear about the grants that the county gives, and it would be hard for us to make those decisions.
Dan, you said 2014, but won't we be looking at the grant request and the grant for 2013 this fall?
No, right, we're always looking forward.
Okay.
So you all determined the grant funding in November for 2013. The city is still deciding about 2013. So we're already focused on 2014.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So the other thing that the city did agree to is while we're considering these possible other funding solutions, is that their participants on the committee would bring to the council continuing 2012 levels of funding for 2013, and apparently, Nan, as you had described, the nonprofit funding would be the same
across the board.
That's what
I heard.
Okay.
Right. And then 2014 though is up for grabs, and that's why we would like to see a decision before we send out a joint grant application, because I think what I've learned in this whole process is that if we don't know where the city stands, we can't tell the applicants, and then they're not sure, they go through a whole now almost a year of application, not knowing that the city wants to reduce funding. And so what has happened is the applicants keep asking the city for more, and they need to be communicated with by the city about what their intention is. And so...
What was that timeline again?
So they have to apply. Our application is due on August 1st, but we put the applications out in May or the very latest early June to give them 2 months to complete the application.
Right. So
Most of our Health and Human Services agencies are already partners of ours, so they don't even have to do an application for us. They have to do an application for the city because the city is only giving annual funding. So if you were to sever the opportunity, now would be a good time to do that because they're still on annual grants and we're giving partnership grants.
So it's actually, to me, it's an opportune time for the city to try to make that decision given the May-June timeframe, because as we all know, there's going to be city elections in first week in May, where we'll have a new mayor and possibly two new council members. And so I would hope that this issue in terms of funding our health and human services from a discretionary point of view becomes an important topic of discussion amongst those running for mayor and council this spring. And then from there, we'd have a better idea for the nonprofits of what they may or may not expect in 2014.
Right, that's good timing. Right.
So we'll be working to try and really further explore the feasibility and timelines of both the funding solutions and the decision process solutions by May. So we're going to start those discussions at the end of this month. We'll have to bring it back and figure out if any of these proposed next steps really do have any traction.
Questions? Steve?
Just a comment. Looks like just in terms of efficiency for the nonprofit groups, if there's one pot of money and one process for applying for the grants from that, whether it be a combination of city and county and nonprofit groups making the decision or whatever, but that would make a simplified process for distributing the money.
That's how we got here where we are now.
Yeah.
And apparently what has happened in doing that is that the city council feels disenfranchised or disconnected from the way that who they're giving money to and what the point is. So it seems efficient, but right now we've had a lot of meetings that are making it
They're unhappy with that system, so, okay.
Yeah, so we need to either let it go for a while if it's not working for the city because they have other priorities. That's fantastic. Or we need to find a solution where they're involved. So because we, as you guys know, our grant review committee members read volumes, thousands, upwards of 1,000 pages. And so you all are very familiar with these agencies. We come to you all the time. You know what the social human issues are. And the city doesn't have that venue all year, except for the one joint meeting where we go in October. And apparently that conversation they've not connected to. It's not been valuable for them. So we're learning. We'll figure out if it doesn't work, we'll be open to another way of doing it.
I guess I'm a little unclear as to whether or not the city feels disenfranchised and they don't want to give money because of that, or they've got other priorities with their budget and they don't feel that this is the best use of their taxpayers' dollars, which is their prerogative as elected officials in that municipality. So I don't understand why they really haven't come forward, to my knowledge, with explaining whether it's one or the other, because the disenfranchised issue I think we can solve. They've got higher priorities for their money.
Yeah.
That if they choose not to give this benefit to the community because they feel another benefit is better, be it the bike race or anything else, that's the city's choice. They're the people that are elected by the citizens of the city to allocate the funds of the city. And to put that onus on us as elected officials, saying that we're not doing our fair share, I just think that's wrong of the city to make that judgment of us, because we're doing above and beyond, and our taxpayers have told us to go above and beyond.
I think it's important to note that the city feels they're going above and beyond as well with their arts tax and their child welfare tax and their nonprofit funding. So I think that, in the AACP, I'm just going to go back to that, we talked about in the Lifelong Aspenite chapter the issue of subsidies and what's happening and the fact that we need to really look at how all of us are working together for subsidies, housing, health and human services, community nonprofits, transportation, childcare. And so I think it just seems to be timing right now that we're all looking at it going, are we in this together or are we going to do this separately? And do we really need to look at collectively, strategically, how we're supporting this community?
Yeah, no, I totally agree, Nan. I think, Rob, to your point, I don't think the policymakers have made a determination about which is more important. That I think part of what we identified is not being as connected to this review process, maybe not having some of the information that is identified in the analysis process. They're not quite sure that they've got the right information to make that prioritization, and so I think that's maybe why we haven't gotten that kind of answer. And that's why these discussions have actually, I think, had some value, because we've been able to explore those issues. I think it's been a forthright discussion, but I don't know that they're feeling like they've got all the information they need to make the decisions you've laid out.
Any other questions or comments? Good, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is the Galena Plaza discussion. Change seats here, and Jody Smith. Want the lights off without help? The lights off on that?
I don't know, I think we could start here if you want them on.
Okay.
So, Jody Smith, Facilities Manager,
Jack Wheeler, Facilities Project Manager.
and we're here today to give you an update and just kind of talk about the Galena Plaza development that's going on with the City of Aspen right now. It encompasses many different aspects of how it affects Pickens County and how we're working together on that. Number one, it's the plaza there where you can see the park. It's adjacent to the library, the jail, the courthouse. And so that redevelopment really does affect what we're doing as far as the library easement, the law enforcement parking. And the reason that they are doing the redevelopment of that site is that they have a leaky roof. They've put off the construction of that for several years pending the library expansion discussions and those types of things. So they're at about 50% of their design work right now. And we got involved about a month ago, well, we've been involved for quite some time because they also are redoing the Mill Street Alley and the Galena where the police officers park right now. So it's a pretty big area because we have drainage issues and leaking roofs. Again, city staff has worked with the county staff, the assets, our department. We've also worked with law enforcement, both the police department and the sheriff's office, in looking how the design affects us in the parking. And so I'm going to go over a couple of the alternatives and recommendation that we had as a team on that. The goal of that is to develop the pedestrian parkway there, accommodate public safety's parking. We have courts in the courthouse, and we're also really looking at a bigger picture of how this whole thing affects how the design and what we're looking at for the future of the whole campus. And at the end of this, we're hoping to ask BOCC for direction of whether or not we, as county staff, continue to pursue our preferred alternative with the City of Aspen, or if there's other direction. I will tell you that we did meet with City Council last night. They went over the alternatives, and I'll give you an update on what their input was on that. And then lastly, it wasn't part of the original agenda when I submitted my agenda item summary to you, that it wasn't on the agenda for City Council. So Kathy Chandler is here also in case you have questions about the discussion that City Council had last night based on a couple of correspondence that the library board submitted to City Council regarding the 44-foot easement, and I'll let Kathy address that towards the end. So you can see here on our, is this it? So we're basically talking about this parking right here. And this is pretty much how it is laid out today. That we have the law enforcement parking in here. There's a couple of spots that the police department uses here, and then we have, where are we at? There's parking, this is the sheriff's office parking lot back here. So I kind of wanted to give you that orientation. So this is the proposed alternate number 1. We worked on this based on the criteria that the law enforcement, both sheriff and police, needed 28 spaces to do their daily operations. So that was one of the criteria. The other criteria was that they needed to stay within 150 feet of the courthouse so that they could have adequate response time in the event of, whatever their services are and emergency call-outs. The other criteria was that the alley would become one-way here. So they'll be coming off of Mill Street, going into the alley and coming out. Galena on the west side of the courthouse will be, this has to be widened. The city engineering department will have to widen this regardless if it's status quo or if it's in any configuration that we do. They need to redesign that per engineering standards and parking standards or in traffic. And then we have 2 alternatives. So this is the first one where we have 10 existing spaces back here, along with those 10. Those are police vehicles. We have 2 court spaces over here. We have the jail vehicle that is in that lot, but there are 10 specified for law enforcement, and those are in existence. Right now we have a variety of parking that happens out here. This is not cut out in here. They just park along the alleyway and they park along this side. So this is to close this off and provide the 6 spaces here. The other thing that the city was proposing is to add 2 public parking places here for people to come in and do business with the police department or the sheriff's office as the short-term parking, and possibly an ADA parking there. I don't know how far we've gotten into that detail.
Before you flip, Jody, so this represents pretty much what's currently happening?
No, this is the new.
So do you have a slide showing what's currently happening as a comparison?
I don't really.
Or can you just sort of explain that?
Yeah, so right now we have, this is existing, and then we have 2 spots over here that the officers use, so that's adding these 2, and then there is no parking on the street here
Right now.
right now,
And so,
So there's parking here, though.
both sides.
and so, excuse me, Rob. So in this idea, you're adding some spaces here. I assume that a lot of these spaces here are currently cars that are actually being parked.
Over here?
Well, even in the circle. I always see cars parked in the circle.
Oh, yeah.
Sitting there.
Yeah, no, they're all the way over here into this circle here.
This is where the circle is
Yeah.
existing.
Oh, yeah, the existing circle. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, Rob.
Jody is the...
Wait,
oh,
Rob,
sorry.
So in terms of comparing this to existing, this looks like more parking spaces than we currently have, because there's parking on this side and this side right now, but it's not head-in parking on this side.
Right, I think, do you know how many they have on that?
Depends on how you look at it. If you go on today's standards, we can only park 6 cars in the existing
In here.
space legally.
Okay.
If you go out there on any given day,
So we're
there's
adding
between-
2 here.
There's between 6 and 15 vehicles out there, depending on what's going on in town.
So if this is, so we're not adequate right now as part of it. But
Correct.
we're adding 2 here, right? Because it's 6
Yes.
to 8. We're adding 8 here, so that's 10 that we're adding. And we're adding 2 here, so that's 12 parking spaces that this plan is adding from our existing non-adequate parking scenario. Because this stays the same.
But you'll note that all of those 12 vehicles are all cramming in here.
You're correct
Yeah.
in what you said, but all of those vehicles are currently being used. Currently, they have a need for 28 vehicles on shift, and they are parking on the west side of the courthouse and in the lower jail lot, all of them, however they're doing it.
And also around the circle.
Correct.
they're all around the circle as well. So
That's
On the
correct.
sidewalk.
we're just redistributing them, keeping that circle actually free.
Well, that circle will no longer be there.
It'll go.
Steve?
Is the sidewalk, are the sidewalks bigger in this to make it more pedestrian friendly? Like you're eliminating the, where they pull in, head in on the west side. So is that sidewalk turned into a wider pedestrian walkway kind of a thing?
I think in the concept of the plans that they have right now, it does get wider than it is currently.
And the street's narrower, or is the street kind of the same?
The street, will at the end of the day, the clearance is in the street to an orderly parking structure, which we don't have right now. At the end of the day, the street will have more clearance because of the order we're bringing to it.
Okay.
And part of that is that we need to be able to have fire trucks go through there, and right now it's not adequate for that. So there's other standards that the city engineering is looking at. So as part of this plan is that we're proposing to add 8 spaces out front here for the sheriff's office or law enforcement. And that kind of fits into our overall, seems as the sheriff's office has just moved some of their operations and administration up into the main floor of the courthouse in the old DA's office. So that gives them a quicker response out to the front street to respond. So this is the alternate number 1. We wanted to give you that to look at, and then I have another one unless you have more questions on this one.
Can I ask,
Sure.
maybe it's a question for Joe. Can you just explain the 150 feet? Do we need 150 feet for all 28 vehicles? Can we look at 20 vehicles and 8 vehicles that get parked 200 feet away?
I don't know where that 200 feet would be. Where else can we park them?
Yeah, I mean, well, where does the 150 feet come from, I guess is more my direct question. Is that a 10-minute response time from office to, or 10-second response time from office to starting a car? And are 28 officers going to be in the office at once that all need to get in their car? Are 28 people going to respond to a particular phone call where all those cars need to be within 150 feet from that center location, which is ground zero?
I think the best way to answer that, if we consider the courthouse the epicenter of this,
Yeah,
outside that 150-foot zone, I don't see a place to park police cars in close to, within the proximity of the courthouse without going blocks and blocks and blocks away. I don't see an alternative here outside. The 150 feet, I think the question is, the 150 feet is basically the number we gave the city engineers when they were doing this, that I think is a proper response time, that we can get the cars, get in the cars, leave safely from the epicenter, if you will, and respond to calls. That, I don't know that that
No,
answered your
it
question.
doesn't exactly answer my question, because my concern here is that 28 cars on immediate response need from the proximity to the courthouse, to me, doesn't sound like a necessity of our sheriff's department, in the sense that, you know, if you've got an office manager that drives a sheriff's vehicle, they can park in the garage. They're not going to be responding to an incident and need to get to their car within 10 seconds. If you've got someone in the communications department who's a sheriff coordinating something, or the jail department, you know, the jailer's not going to, when a call comes in, need to run to his car in 10 seconds and leave the jailhouse. So I don't know where the 28 people is coming from, and I'm trying to determine whether or not 30% of those cars could be parked further away, because this looks like a police state in front of our courthouse, and quite frankly, I don't like the feel of it. So part of this, I think, might be employee management, in the sense that if you've got an officer who's manning the front desk, are they going to be responding to something, and does their car need to be parked out in front of the courthouse? If they're the person that stays at ground zero when a response comes in. So where does the number 28 come from? How many of those really need to be within 150 feet? And where does the 150-foot number come from?
Joey, I wonder if you could hold that,
Yeah.
hold that question and go through this other scenario. And I just want to make a note that this is not just for the sheriff.
Yeah.
It's for the City of Aspen Police Department as well. So
Yeah.
you keep on referring to the
Okay.
sheriff.
Sure.
But the sheriff is only one part of this need.
So this is the alternative number 2, and this kind of spreads it out a little bit where, again, we maintain our 10 spots that we have in the back lot of the jail. This actually cuts into the Galena Plaza where the berm is and the trees. That would add 5 spaces there. We still maintain the 2 public spots, 3 here, 2 here, and we still have 8 along the front on Main Street. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Main Street, the 8 parking places that we talked about here. This does require a curb cut into the grassy knoll there. The City Parks Department, from the way we understand it, is that they are considering and looking at the possibility of replacing or relocating those crabapple trees right now. It's not written in stone yet. It's part of a conversation. Right now, you know, we've had so many years of those trees bearing fruit and the bear problems, and some of them are going to be required to be replaced anyway. So they're looking at, do we pull, or when they take some of those out, can we put a parking back on there? Or relocate them and just make that green area smaller. And one of the questions that City Council had last night was, is that a historic preservation issue? And Scott Miller, who's the Director of Assets for the city, he did get an answer from them today that it's not a big deal to them. It's more about they don't have a call on the outside of the building on that property. They're not historic. So that's kind of where we're at with this alternative. Alternative number 1, which is the one you just saw prior to this, that is staff's recommendation. That is the alternative that the police, sheriff, city, county staff thought was the best solution for this whole plan. Last night at the council meeting, the biggest concern of council was the 8 spots on Main Street. A couple of the members had real concerns about public perception and the trees and taking them out. So they asked staff, city assets team, to go back and look at what would it look like if we stayed with status quo, of exactly what it looks like now today, where they're parking on both sides of this, with some improvements. And so city staff, we're going to go back. We'll meet with them again on Thursday and brainstorm, but we wanted your input of, do you like where we're going with this? Do we need to, where does the board want us to go? And we are going back before the, or City Council is hearing this again on March 19th. So we wanted to make sure you were up to speed. And
I have a question. I have some similar concerns, maybe a little bit different than Rob's, in terms of the 8 spots along the Main Street. One, I would hate to see all of those crabapple trees disappear. I mean, they're so pretty, and it really sets the stage for people coming into town and walking and seeing the historic courthouse. And the other concern is for bicyclists. Are we really starting to eliminate then the bicyclists are basically in the main lane as a car. And I know the city is trying to come up with a bicycle-friendly road system. But my question then is, in terms of trying to move, if not all of these 8 spaces, but maybe just a few of them to cut them down, the city has a parking office right next door to us, and there's a lot right there. Is there a possibility, have you explored that possibility of putting 4 or 5 cars in that lot?
We actually had it, that was one of our alternatives. We had 9 that we looked at, and when we reviewed those as a team, we came down to the 2 that you guys are seeing. And one of yes, they looked at the possibility of cutting right in here, and digging out, building a barrier wall, and then having 6 spaces in here. The Zepanzas property is not the county's property. I think we've taken that off the plate, that we're not intending to go there. And by staff just kind of felt like if we go there, it compromises us in a few ways, because number one, we have dumpsters here. It also, what were the other reasons, Jack?
There's snow stack area
Yeah,
in there.
snowing.
The expense of installing a temporary parking solution, because Zepansis is, nobody knows what the long-term plans are for it. So we were trying to look at more long-term solutions, because we think with what we're looking at right now, long-term, we have a parking issue. And as we solve some of those long-term issues, having that parking on Main Street, where it is similar to the rest of the uses on Main Street, there's parking all along Main Street. It helps as courts grow, other services grow within the town campus, and there is some talk of long-term plans for parking in the back, and even if we move law enforcement to the back, we can revert those front parkings to either paid parking or services parking for the buildings for the town campus. So we think that Main Street is a good long-term solution. In the plans that we were looking at, we're not looking at eliminating the trees, we're looking at replacing the trees with, the city is looking at replacing those trees with non-fruit bearing crabapple trees. So we still maintain the same appearance. It is a historic use there. In the response that the Historic Preservation Committee sent to us, they included pictures of parking all along that with the trees behind it.
So then my last question here, and hopefully then we'll let Joey respond back to Rob's question, because mine is sort of similar. I understand 150 feet because, once you move a block away, you might as well be moving 3 or 4 blocks away. But do we have the ability, and not just us, but the city of Aspen, since we're also talking about parking the police cars, the city cars as well, not just the sheriff's car, that they can allocate X amount of spots right across the street by St. Mary's, or just down the street along Concept 600. A few spots here, a few spots there, and spread that out. It goes beyond, a little bit beyond 150-foot mark if you go down to Concept 600, but certainly right across the street from St. Mary's doesn't. So I'll just throw that out, and then Joey, you can perhaps respond back to Rob's question and maybe frame this so we have a better idea in terms of what the challenges are, not just for the Sheriff's Department, but for the City of Aspen Police Department.
Well, I think I'd just start off with my presentation that I gave last night to City Council. And in a nutshell, I think to answer your question, those 28 spots are a combination of police, sheriff, and jail vehicles all across the board. The main problem I see here is this epicenter that the city is planning to make a pedestrian road into the Galena Plaza is really a mixed-use area. I mean, we have a lot of activity going on there between emergency vehicles coming in and out, prisoners walking back and forth to the jail. the daily business that the courthouse has on every level. So as I said, with the mixed use of a lot of activity that needs to happen around that building just for doing business, we need this amount of parking. 28 is what we came up with. Specifically to your question, and George is yours, is the example I used last night is on any given day, let's use our lowest level of emergency response, which could be a traffic accident or a domestic violence issue. I really don't want my officers, and I think I could speak for Richard Pryor as well, in the few minutes prior to going to a call, that time is pretty frantic, at least in your own brain. I described it last night as being late for work, looking for your car keys. Your field of image, your field of vision gets shrunken down, and you really don't know what's really happening in your world. That's exactly what it's like when you respond to a call. So for a cop to have a stressor on him already of going to a call that might involve somebody's life or an arrest situation, and then have to walk quickly or even run a block and a half, is really only escalating our situation. And then we get in cars and drive out in, whether it's the parking garage or even the back lot onto Bleecker. It's really not a safe position for us to be in when we're dealing with the skate park, the Rio Grande Field, all the other things that happen there. My personal preference would be, I'm not a big fan of the front either, but it's the only option that we had without leaving North Galena intact. So I don't know if that answered any of your questions, but as far as the emergency and non-emergency vehicles, we share the space with the police department. There is no personal car parking back there, Rob, or anywhere on campus. They're either marked police cars or essential response vehicles. The only vehicle I would consider that we own that's a non-emergency or non-response, well, two vehicles would be our civil vehicle and possibly our animal control vehicle. But once again, that's an inconvenience. I don't think the animal control vehicle can fit in the garage. I just don't see any place outside the 150-foot area to put response vehicles without that situation of us running to our cars. And that's the same issue Chief Pryor had with St. Mary's and or the Concept 600. It's really not economical for our cops to be running a block or half a block, jumping in a car and then responding to an emergency call. It's really not pragmatic for our response. Any help on that, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, it's going in the right direction, but I guess specifically what I'm asking, and I want to do what's safe for our community. So you tell me 28 spaces in this configuration is what's going to make our community safe. I'm going to go with it. But I'm also asking if those 28 spaces, if you were to put a name on each one of those cars in a worst-case scenario of 28 people under these responders' supervisions, the police department as well, and you were to tell me that one of those 28 people is the jail keeper who's not going to respond to anything, I would say, well, now we're down to 27, because that person doesn't need to get to his car. He's not going to leave the jailhouse in an emergency. He's designated to be at the jailhouse for that 8-hour shift or whatever. He can park in the garage. And so that's the information that I don't have. If you tell me that we're going to have 28 responders in a worst case scenario that all need to get to their cars, then that's great. But if you tell me that of the 10 spots back here, that 3 of them, no matter what, are not going to leave the jailhouse, even if there's a hostage situation, then those people can park somewhere else, and maybe we can save this front part of the courthouse. I don't have that information in front of me. Where does that number 28 come from? And what are the names and job positions next to those 28 cars in obviously a worst case scenario? Because more often than not, those people are out on the streets patrolling, but in a worst case scenario, 28 people come back here. But if one of those 28 people, as I said, is a sheriff who acts as the office clerk, at the front desk, you're not going to close the office if there's a hostage situation or something. That person's going to stay there. Their car doesn't need to be parked out front. And if it's not parked out front, then, but I just don't have that information.
As I said, the 28 vehicles, please try and separate the jail staff from administrative staff. The 28 cars we're talking about are marked response vehicles. They don't belong to admin staff or jail staff or anything like that. These are marked patrol cars that are parked out there on a day-to-day basis. Now, if you say Joe DeSalvo has a spot, Jody Smith has a spot, Rob Ittner has a spot, and let's add those up to 28, I can't do that, because on any given day, this could double to 56. If we have a wildfire or any kind of event, bike race, this is not sufficient parking as it is. And now if we're limiting it to just 28, I've just taken a lot of options off the table when I need to have people and cars at the courthouse at the same time. And that's where the mixed use comes into. If we need to have every police car that we own and the city owns, there is not enough room in in any configuration to meet that. Now, to limit it to just a 28 and just say this spot belongs to A, B, C, D, E, that really restricts my ability to operate this office.
I kind of like a hybrid here, I'll just throw out, between A and B, because on your recommended scenario, you've got your 8 spaces out in front of the courthouse, and you have 2 spaces in front of a real estate company. No, I'm sorry, I'm going to go wrong. You've got 4 spaces in front of the real estate company, and then you've got another 8 spaces caddy corner. So on this other option where you've actually cut down 2 spaces by the real estate company, you could keep 4 spaces there. You could add another 2 spaces, because you're diagonaling, you don't have room there. That would cut down the number of spaces in front of the courthouse by half. You see what I'm getting at? I don't know whether you looked at that or not. I understand the need to try to fit in the 28 cars. So what's the best scenario? And it seems like if we could break up that block so you don't have the entire front of the courthouse and utilize what you're utilizing under your preferred option, maybe there's a way to blend this in. Steve, you had a question?
I would go back to the Zupancis property as a big part of the solution. Any car that could be parked up on the level behind the City of Aspen parking place would access onto Main Street. They're not going to access down by the Rio Grande Park, then have to go over to North Mill Street and then go up the hill and then get onto Main Street. I'd be willing to bet that somebody could walk the extra 75 feet to their car there and be on the road on Main Street going where they need to faster than if they had, one of these the 10 behind the courthouse plaza going down by, behind the parking garage to get out on the road.
I would agree 100%, Steve. If the Zupancis property was available and had access to Main Street, my pitch to you guys would be, let's park all the cars in the back lot in Zupancis, have a roadway out directly to Main Street. As a professional, it's the safest way to get out of town.
Okay.
But Zupancis is off the table.
Well,
I don't know if it's for sale.
Now what I'm saying is,
I don't know.
some of the problem is the number, I don't know how many police cars park, but part of the parking problem for law enforcement is the City of Aspen Police Department. They own the property right there. I think they should be willing to put that on the table as part of the solution. I think it should be looked at more closely. And I know, John, you had told me that they have that basically for sale right now.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to make sure we had that on the table. I don't know that they have it on the market right now. I do know in their capital plan they have the anticipated sale of the property in their revenues, I think, to fund future capital improvements. And so I want to say, I can't remember what year that's in, but we're presumably only talking about a few-year solution. And so that would be my only caution is I think if we did rely on the Zapanzas, we may be back here having these discussions in the future.
So you get clear direction? Rob?
Two quick comments. One, a couple of people have mentioned to me on the street the possibility of the art museum turning into a either the police department or, and that obviously changes things, having vehicles down there, and, obviously that's a lot of work and probably a little ways off. Two, was there an option developed with 28 parking spaces that does not include the front of the courthouse? And I'd like to see that, because quite frankly, I don't like the cars in front of the courthouse. I'd rather, looking at option 2, I'd rather see all the way around that elbow, cars nosed in, the extra 8 cars parked there. I mean, yes, it makes that open space a little bit more, for lack of a better one, police state type environment, but I like the front of the courthouse the way it is. Courthouses were made, in the turn of the century for specific reasons to show the importance of the county government, and we should have a lot of pride in the front of our courthouse.
So what I'm hearing is similar to probably what you heard, I'll get to you in a sec, Joey, last night is, I don't think we're, at least I'm getting a sense we're not really excited about having so many spots allocated from the courthouse, and there's a way to move those cars around, reconfigure that. I think that's where I'm sensing we're going at this point. Joey?
I just feel like I need to make this statement for the public and for the board as well. Rob, I have to tell you honestly, I considered the art museum as a possible sheriff's office, but it's too far from the jail. We transport prisoners 3 or 4 times a day. It's really not pragmatic for us to be there. I do think it's time for the police department to start looking for a B location that's not in the courthouse, and that would alleviate a lot of these issues. That's the 800-pound gorilla, I just said it, but I do think it's time to really start these conversations and how we're going to live together and or separately, realistically. As I said, this was an option that came up, the whole thing was born out of North Galena. I think there's enough room in North Galena to probably park all these cars. But as I said, the city has a different plan for possible use for it than parking. Last night I was fortunate enough to sit in front of City Council, and Mick Ireland had said the same thing you did about our police state. It really, I don't consider our cars ugly, disgraceful, or anything like that. It doesn't represent force. It's just, we have no other place to park our cars but in a high visibility location in the center of town. That is not my choice. It's the way it is. But I think I'd really like to explore the future of this. I mean, the Zapanzas idea could be a brilliant idea, Steve, if we say to the city, you want to park your 18, 20 patrol cars over there, you could park it there for the next 2 to 3 years until another solution comes up. I don't know if that's an option or not. I'm a public safety person. I'm not an engineer. So I listen to the engineers, and when they tell me certain things can be done and certain things can't be done. I know that this is cramming a lot of cars in a small space, but they're necessary vehicles.
Well, and I think one of the points that was made last night is that there's really 2 different goals and visions here. We've got one vision of making a pedestrian corridor and a user-friendly plaza, and then we have the law enforcement operations. And what City Council said last night is maybe we need to relook at that. And so, and I think the BOCC is saying the same thing as far as maybe we need to use the west side of the courthouse in a different way. We'll go back.
Okay, thanks. We're running over time, but we could probably gain some time towards the end of the meeting. So I just wonder, because the library will play a different role in terms of this renovation of the Galena Plaza. So I wonder if Kathy, just 2 minutes, a quick update, and then the board has any, if you need any direction or any comments from the board, let us know. But just keep it fairly brief, please.
Yes, I will, George, because actually we had asked for a place on next week's agenda
Perfect.
to update you folks. We just didn't want to get the cart in front of the horse. We have been working with the Galena Plaza design team to keep the library's easement on the drawing board as they work on the configuration of the spaces on Galena Plaza, and have been asking them to do the best they can to minimize our need to spend a lot of money to move things off of our easement or to reconfigure the design of things that are placed in the open space in the Galena Plaza in consideration of the possibility that the library would be able to take advantage of its easement sooner rather than later. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we're have been working on, and we have been at a couple of the city council meetings just as part of the process. So we wanted to make sure that the Board of County Commissioners knew that we had been, meeting with city council some. So that's 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah, so we'll see you next week, but I guess the salient point that I'm getting from this is that regardless of what's the discussion in terms of the parking in the reconfiguration of the Galena Plaza, that the library is going to maintain its right for future annexation of those 44 feet. It won't be impeded on.
There won't be impeded on.
Oh, yes, that's what we're working on.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Great, thank you. And we'll see you next week, Kathy.
Okay, thanks, George.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have citizen board interviews. What was that about?
I'm not
Looking
sure
at
that's
all-
the right
looking at all
agenda. We
agenda.
should be on either a break, we had a break scheduled.
Break and then memos of interest.
Oh, on an old agenda. Okay.
Yep.
So we have break at, what time was the break?
It was scheduled
to
for
2:15.
So let's take a break now, 2:15 to 2:30? 15-minute break?
That's up to you guys.
Yeah, because otherwise we're going to run into a long conversation here coming up.
So the open discussion item is probably what's going to be the longest. We need to visit with you guys about the underpass project and the upcoming EOTC meeting.
So we'll take a 15-minute break, grassroots.
I've got a memo here if you guys have, use your break to work.
Sure, John, I'll do that.
Okay, next on our agenda are memos of interest.
Sorry, George. We have one memo of interest, which I'm having difficulty pulling up, but it is a thank you letter from Friends of the Animal Shelter for funding that was received. And that is it.
That's it for MOIs, okay. Future agendas.
Yeah, future agendas, I don't have a whole lot for you. George, I know you and I probably need to get together and talk about the joint meeting with the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board. I just got our first list of topics, and there are 9 of them for the hour, and I don't think we're going to get through all of them, and so we would either need to think about going beyond that 5 o'clock time as a board in that joint meeting with Healthy Rivers and Streams, or see if we can have a discussion with John or Lisa to narrow the scope of that agenda.
Okay.
So, I don't know if the board has any thoughts about willingness to go past that 5 o'clock hour in a joint meeting or not.
Well, even if we went an additional half hour, we probably would still need to narrow down what sounds like a fairly busy agenda.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we can visit about that. Just wanted to note that on March 26th, we did move your abatement hearings to the morning, and so you'll have a late lunch break. So you'd start at 11, go till 1, and have a lunch break. And then we'll come back and we have some topics for you there. And then we're going to be working on getting a briefing scheduled on the CCRC, the Continuing Care Retirement Community, that is being proposed down Basalt, so that you guys can make comments as you see fit as that comes before the Basalt Town Council, and we're asked to make comments on it.
Okay. Anybody else have anything for future agendas? No? Okay. Let's go to open discussion. If we have time, we'll swing back to board reports.
Okay. Yeah, the main item that we wanted to hit in open discussion today is a follow-up from our last EOTC meeting to discuss the bids for the underpass project and budget recommendations. Just before the break, I did hand out to you a short memo, which we'll be referring to as we go through it. But today, what we are hoping to do is, one, track you through what happened decision-wise here, so that you know what information we are working with, how we made decisions, and basically how we got from point A to point B. Two, we have a recommendation for how to move the project forward, which includes funding coming from the county, as well as an ask to the EOTC, which if you all approve where we're headed today, would happen at a special meeting that's scheduled for 4 o'clock this Thursday. And so we're going to need direction about whether you support staff's recommendation or not, and quite frankly, if and how we want to move forward with this project. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian and GR to walk us through the information.
Great. Brian Pettit, I'm the Public Works Director. I'm here with GR Fielding, the County Engineer. And what we want to talk about with regard to the pedestrian crossing project is really reality and expectations. And unfortunately, they're not in support of each other. Maybe if I start with reality, because I think the decision the board needs to look at today is that situation. The expectations are conditions that we can't change. And I think the decision today is based on the fact that we are short funding for the pedestrian crossing to the tune of $2,050,000. So with regard to that, staff has come up with a plan on how we could fund that, basically splitting the difference between EOTC and the county 50-50. On the county side, we would move back a bridge replacement project, which is the Castle Creek Bridge. It's on Castle Creek Road about 9 miles. It's not in imminent danger of falling down by any stretch of the imagination. It does need replacing. By working through this and budgeting the money of $1,025,000 to the pedestrian crossing, we would move that bridge back to be replaced in 2018. And in between now and then, we're required by the state to inspect bridges every 2 years. We would continue to do that and make sure the bridge is safe. We feel confident that it will be. In addition to that, the other ask would be to the OTC on Thursday, and that would be to the tune of $1,025,000 also, and that would come out of the $3 million capital pool that was designated about a year ago by the EOTC to fund projects like this that are supported by grants. The other thing we're doing is working with the airport and RAFTA to look at value engineering opportunities. There are ideas that are on the table right now, but it's going to take further design and engineering analysis to see if they will save money and just how much money they will save. But we're continuing down that path as well. So to consider this request on the merits of the project, RAFTA, the airport, CDOT, and county staff continue to support this project. Over the life of this tunnel, millions of people will cross through it. And I think based on GR's analysis of the pedestrian movements in this area, we're seeing over 250 people a day traveling across the road. And about 30% of those people are traveling in a rogue fashion. They're crossing the road either illegally or in the middle of the highway, and which increases the safety risk. The tunnel is placed directly where the people were crossing the road in rogue fashion to try to facilitate that movement. We also relocated the bus stop that RAFT is reconstructing to better align it with a future terminal expansion, which was just recently approved with the airport master plan. So that's where we are from a reality standpoint. The unfortunate part of that, and what brought us to today's request for funding, was a miss in the estimate that Parsons Transportation provided us. And that chronology of estimating is represented on the last page of your packet, if you want to turn there. And while I've placed a large amount of responsibility onto Parsons for their missed estimate, I will say there have been some changes to the project as well. One is we changed our approach to how we're going to be dealing with utilities, basically moving them twice because of the amount of utilities that are in the way. The other things we did, we expanded our snowmelt system to the project, which was needed because of the amount of snow that's going to be handled in that area. I think it'll make a much better project and ultimately save money in the long run because you won't have to deal with snow removal. The other design change was based on the airport's request for a design change in a wall system. It cost a little bit of money, but certainly not the full $2 million request that's before us today. So to walk you through the packet a little bit, first page, of course, is the agenda item summary. I wanted to remind the board what the tunnel looks like. This is a very welcoming structure. It's 16 feet wide and 10 feet tall at the top of the arch that you see on the second page there. So this is fully lighted, and I think will be quite an amenity to the area from a multimodal standpoint. This is going to be where air transportation interfaces with ground transit. And I think that in the future, people will look at this and appreciate that it's there. The third page is a view from the Aspen Airport Business Center side. And what this shows is how topography is working for us. The outlet of the tunnel will virtually open up into the Aspen Airport Business Center. And then, of course, you'd have to climb up to get to the bus stop if you weren't going to the business center itself. The third and fourth pages are really a visual depiction of where the tunnel is to be placed. If you look at the illustration that shows the transit stop in pink, we are proposing again to move the Up Valley Transit stop to be closer aligned with the future terminal reconstruction at the airport. and that the tunnel would be placed between the two transit stops, the Down Valley stop being just below it and the Up Valley stop just being above it. The next page is to show you how this affects our capital road plan. And again, it's moving one project out to the year 2018, and this is the Castle Creek Bridge reconstruction project. That's the way we balanced it on the county side. The last page is, again, in chronology from the first estimate we had at the very bottom to the top where the bids came in and showed us what our shortfall would be. It gave us our reality. We did have several estimates in between those two, and each of them incrementally were increased based on new information, revised estimates. The final estimate actually on the February 1st of 2013 was based off a unit cost that RAFTA had received previously. I think the one thing that staff was reminded about was the cost of doing work in the Roaring Fork Valley. The three contractors that bid on this project are large earthwork contractors out of the Front Range. And one of the areas where we saw an overage was our mobilization costs were, I think, $400,000 over our engineer's estimate. And I think we've seen a shift in the economy. I think there's more construction available on the Front Range, and it costs more money to do work in the Roaring Fork Valley, both from a mobilization standpoint and just availability of employees and raw resources to get the job done. So that's where we are today, and the question in front of this board is to change the road capital plan, to back up the bridge work of Castle Creek Road, and contribute another $1,025,000 to the pedestrian crossing at the ABC.
Thanks, Brian. I got a couple of questions to start off with. On the Castle Creek Upper Bridge project, the dollars that you've now shifted to 2017 and 18, are those the same dollars that you would have budgeted for 2013 and 14, or have they been adjusted for inflation or projections in terms of future higher costs for construction?
We haven't adjusted those for inflation.
So we probably need to change that number a little as we're planning. I don't know if that's going to be a big number or a little number, how that may play into that, but that's...
It won't be it should not change the, it'll change the fund balance, but it should not put us out of balance, so it shouldn't be a big number.
Your comment, Brian, about the cost for the mobilization using out-of-valley contractors. In regards to the utility movement, had we looked at this in terms of a separate contractor, separate projects, would we have utilized a more of a local contractor for the movement of the utilities?
For the utility relocates, it is actually separated out, and each of the utilities will use their contractor to do it because they are specialty contractors. And that really revolves around things like the electric line and the two gas lines that need to be relocated.
So again, those subs, are they coming out from the Front Range? Would they normally come from the Front Range, or do we know? We don't know yet.
We don't know. Our contracts with the utility companies themselves, and then they contract out for the utility to be moved.
Oh, okay. So that would have happened regardless.
That's right.
As a separate deal. Okay,
That's
I was just
exactly
curious because that's sort of a major component of this whole cost as part of this whole project is the relocation of those utilities.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Questions, Steve?
Kind of along the same line as George's question, by combining the BRT bus stops with the tunnel project to get the economy of scale of having one big contractor from Denver come in, it seems like we're eliminating. Didn't Gold Construction do a lot of the BRT stuff? So we're eliminating a local contractor there if we kept the two projects separate and let local a local firm do the BRT project. I'd like to see the local firms get some of the action on this, and probably they would as subcontractors anyhow, or perhaps.
All the local firms had their opportunity to bid on this, and they chose not to. And as you mentioned, Gould is still the contractor for the ongoing BRT project. These stops were pulled by RAFTA from that and rebid, and they chose not to bid it. I think that if you walk around Aspen right now, you'll see a number of very large earth-moving projects going on, and that's something that Brian hit on. I think a lot of the contractors that are here locally that are left over after this last economic downturn are pretty busy, between the community school out in Woody Creek, the music school job, the hospital, the art museum. Those are all keeping a lot of contractors very busy. So I think that's more of the reason why we didn't see a lot of the local guys.
Okay. Is there any possibility of using open space and trails money for the project? This is possibly the most important, trail in the whole county would be the one from the airport to the airport business center. I don't know if their funds are earmarked for.
Yeah, I think this one, because it's a pedestrian crossing related to mass transit, would probably be outside of the charter components of open space and trails. So we are exploring the option, however, that a portion of the county funding may be able to be derived from airport funds at this time. Our suggestion, because of the timelines, is that the county make an overall commitment, and then we look to find alternative sources from the general fund, like the airport and such. But I think those are going to take a little bit more time to accurately sort out, and so we don't want to put a number to those right now.
And one other question or thought, RAFTA was talking about if the tunnel's not going to be built, they would put in bus stops at the existing locations. Then if the tunnel's built in the future, then they would build new bus stops in a different location. And that's like throwing good money after bad in my estimation. And if we figure in the cost of saved money for them only building one bus stop instead of two, I think that should be taken into consideration.
Yeah, I was going to kind of ask a question along those lines, which is the tough question, which is, what's the best no-go scenario? I think we need to consider that. I mean, with a $2 million increase, what is now looking like $3 to $2 million, 60% increase, and it was kind of pitched to us the other day as a 33% increase, which is a little different, than a week ago. What the $2 million cost to make the crosswalk where it is safe, and save 33%. I don't know what that option is. It hasn't been presented to us. And I kind of lean towards what's been said here and what was said the other day about, where's GOCO money going to be down the road? Not GOCO money, or CDOT money. Where this fits in with the BRT and that sort of stuff. But these are big dollars. And I'd really like to see what the no-go best case scenario is, with no overpass and no underpass, and some sort of berm fence system so people don't cross where they're not supposed to cross, better signal lighting stuff, better waiting area for when you're trying to cross. you know, to me, that could come in millions of dollars or $1 million below what our projected costs were 2 weeks ago, which is $2 million lower than what our projected costs are today.
Right. I talked to Dan Blankenship at length about what the no-go scenario would look like, and Raft is in a difficult position because they moved the bus stop to align it with this tunnel and really put their resources into re-engineering that and dropped the former plan to put it where it is today in the Up Valley location. I think they would build it in the current location just because of its proximity to the crossing of the highway. The issue there is a land ownership issue. We'd have to clarify that with the FAA and the airport, because right now they would need to build part of that bus stop on FAA property, and we'd need to get appropriate clearances there. With regard to the crossing and making it safe, it would be an all-stop scenario where that intersection, there would be no traffic movement to allow pedestrians to cross. The delay would be substantial for pedestrians because they'd have to wait for that situation to happen, and the delay would even be more substantial for traffic because they'd be an all-stop scenario. That would be the way to make that crossing safe. But to block pedestrians physically is a challenge. We've tried it in other areas, and it just hasn't been proven successful.
And one of the costs that I'm not sure is in this is, because I kept on bringing it up over the last year, which is more than just this tunnel has to be done. I think some of those other things still have to be done to keep people from crossing at the intersection. You know, someone coming from North 40, they're not going to, and they want to go to the airport, until the airport terminal gets moved, which is potentially years down the road, their quickest path is across 82 where the intersection light is. And that's a lot of the traffic going from, you know, one side of the highway to the other. And I'm not sure how much of the traffic is from bus stop to bus stop. Someone doesn't get off one bus and say, I'm going back the other way. So
Funny you should ask.
I just don't know what all the scenarios are here, and it's a tough $2 million decision to make.
John?
Yeah, Rob, I appreciate what you're saying and how George and I had a chance to talk about this a little bit too, because this is a go or no-go decision. And one of the things I caution George and I'd caution you all about is we shouldn't be making this decision based on the fact that Parsons really botched their estimate. Brian, I think you're very kind to Parsons. I think they really did a poor job on this. I'm just going to say that. And so, you know, I think we're probably not going to have the scenarios or engineering on alternatives done in time for a Thursday meeting. And so the real question is, had Parsons not botched this estimate that we relied on for budgeting, if it had come in at a more accurate number, say that $5 million, would that have changed your decision at the time? That's kind of the way I think we need to think about, because if it would have, then we need to reconsider this project. But if Parsons had come in with that estimate and we would still be moving forward, then we should be finding a way to make this piece of public infrastructure work. You know, if you look at this sheet that Brian said on the estimates, you know, really, when you take the CDOT funding into account, we budgeted just over $3.3 million, $3,355,000. We were basing that estimate on really that November 12th number. Okay, so we budgeted $3.3 million, we had a $3.2 million. We knew in December, which was incidentally one day after we adopted the budget, that we had a new estimate that came in a little bit higher. But the fact is typically when you get these estimates, those estimates fall kind of in the middle of where your bids end up. So we felt like we're still in a good range. In no scenario did we expect that Parsons would be off as much as it was. So we did miss budget. It was based on the work Parsons had done in estimating the budget. Now, the real question I'd encourage you to think about, if it had been at $5 million when Parsons had given us, would your decision be different?
I totally get the logic of understanding that, but the piece that's still missing is that had the estimate been set at $5 million, we would have had other $5 million comparative options to compare it to, and we haven't to now. So the sense is, if we'd made the decision, 3 months ago to do a $5 million project, I would have said, well, absent an underpass, what do we get for $5 million? We haven't had that discussion yet. And we haven't had the discussion of what $5 million can do to the overall plan here. And I'm not saying that this still isn't the right thing to do. We're spending $5 million to make that scenario safe, this area safe. I don't mind spending that type of money on that sort of thing. But is this the right plan? Because it's like poker. Once you're pot committed, you're pot committed. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure that we're pot committed yet. We haven't spent the money yet because,
You're right. We don't have a project right now that's actually over budget. We have a bid that's over budget. We haven't started building anything, which is why we're having this discussion. We did spend a lot of time though going through scenarios within, one, we made a determination that a grade separated crossing was preferable. It's either going over or is going under. And we went through a pretty robust public process then to have the discussion about should that grade separation go over or under. We had eliminated very early on, regardless of the cost differentials, the at-grade crossing options. I think because, and you guys may be able to correct me here, but I think it's because of the traffic flows. I think it was because of the ongoing safety concerns that you typically have with an at-grade crossing. And so then we went into analyzing with the public grade separated crossings, and we analyzed overpasses and underpasses and circle cross passes and quite a few alternatives there. And the public process really pointed us to quite frankly what I think is what is a much nicer design than what we've seen, and a much more robust design than what we've seen in a grade separated crossing. And the input that we got was that the problem with smaller boxes and such is that they actually don't encourage folks to use them. They're not inviting spaces. They don't always feel like safe spaces. And so that's where you get, Rob, I think a lot of what you're addressing as real concerns, which is, do people continue to cross at grade in uncontrolled parts of the highway, and still having that safety concern. The solution that we chose and that the policymakers chose was to make a more inviting, larger underpass. It has architectural elements that other underpasses don't have, with the arch and the rockways, and the width of it is, I believe, at about 16 feet with a minimum of 6 foot height, and then it arches higher, so that the underpass would draw people into it who wanted to cross either from the bus station, the A, B, C or the airport. So those were all options that throughout the process were vetted. I think one of the problems we're having is that process has been over a relatively long period of time. I think we've been at this planning process for over a year now, 2 years. And so we may lose some of the discussions about how we are trying to address those problems. I fully understand what you're saying, but I just want to provide the board and public assurance that these are questions that were asked. We did end up with the design that we have as a way to address it, and it is a more expensive design potentially than, we could build a smaller box underneath, or we could maybe do a different kind of overpass, but those we're spending the extra funds because of the public process, or suggesting to spend the extra funds because of the public process we went through. Is it, but does that price point, would that have changed, once we had gotten to that point with the options? Does it change, I think, is the key question. Your thoughts about the benefits of the project?
And as I said at our last ELTC meeting, I thought really the threshold question is, do we still believe that a pedestrian underpass is a safety project? Is it also a traffic enhancement project that not only as we look now and next year, but will be in place 20, 30 years from down the road, where we will have a new airport terminal, and we will have, who knows what sort of modes of transportation will be going between the airport and downtown Aspen. How will we be moving people more effectively and efficiently? And so this is part of a long-term solution to what has become more and more of a safety and traffic problem. And so, $5 million, if we project that out for 30 years, maybe it isn't that much. I think what would make this successful is for us to retain the partnerships that we have. And that is a partnership with CDOT, that we have $1.5 million committed, and it's going to be a use it or lose it. And we don't know if and when, if this project would come back 5 or 10 years from now. Certainly the cost of the project will go up substantially, and we don't know in terms of the funding option from CDOT and the faster funds. And we have the ELTC as a partner. And specifically, we allocated a portion of those dollars, those tax dollars, to go specifically for capital projects. And whether it's this capital project, or I suspect in a few years we'll see a request from the city of Aspen to utilize some of those funds for Ruby Park Transit Center, or who knows what may happen up at Snowmass. So that's what these dollars are for. It's for capital projects to improve our overall transportation system in and out of our community, which includes certainly our safety of our pedestrians. So for me, I could see us moving this forward. I see that we have the ability to absorb half of this additional cost just by moving one of our capital projects around, similar to what we did last year, where we moved many of our road projects ahead to take advantage of some good bids at low cost. So we're just shifting those projects around to better utilize our dollars today versus 3 or 4 years down the line. And I hope that the city of Aspen and the town of Snowmass also sees the value of this, that the county, at least from my point of view, I'm willing to commit hard dollars, real dollars towards this project. And the dollars that we would be utilizing from the ELTC are really borrowed dollars that will get fed back into that capital project pool for Ruby Park, renovation, or a town of snowmass project, or an intercept project. But these are the ways. The only ways we can get this size of a project done is to maintain these partnerships. And if we are not able to maintain these partnerships on a project like this, then I would question our ability, certainly with the ELTC, to try to agree on future projects in terms of how those capital dollars will be used. So I will support utilizing and committing county dollars because I think this project's important. It's important now. It's going to be even more important 20 years from now. Rob.
On the, just to understand the road capital plan investment, because what I've heard is moving the cost of the Castle Creek Bridge of about a little under $1 million, $900,000, out 5 years allows us to pay an extra $1 million, but that can't be true because the interest of moving that 5 years isn't $1 million back into the budget. So really, where's the money coming from? It's coming from fund balance of some extent.
Yeah.
Certainly moving that out allows us to do it next year, but it doesn't mean that we still don't have to lose $1 million out of our capital road plan, because moving that project out 3 years, as we've already said, it's going to have additional costs because of the cost of inflation, and we all know the building costs are getting stronger and stronger as time goes out. So really, where is the money coming from?
And Rob, you're exactly right that what you may recall from when we did our 2013 budget adoption with the capital plan and 5-year plan is that in the out years of the capital plan, fund balance is actually growing again, because basically we've had a very aggressive few years, this last few years, in capital road as well as facility projects, so we drew that fund balance down. We have a little bit less aggressive plan that allows our revenues to catch back up and fund balance to start to build again. And you are absolutely right that the reason we can push it out is that we had more fund balance built up in the out years, and so that fund balance will be building up at a slower rate. We pushed it past the pinch point, if you will, of cash flow in the capital plan. So it is coming out of that capital fund balance, or the anticipated capital fund balance. It's not, we don't have new money in there. We're certainly not getting it off of our investment income, as you point out. That's pretty minimal. And so what we are doing is, what we're saying is we did have additional unappropriated fund balance anticipated in the capital plan, because we have some mid-years there where we're not as aggressive in our expenditures, and we could move this project out and use that fund balance. So we are using, but it is fund balance that is anticipated to be in the capital plan. We're not pulling it out from that operations side or somewhere else.
So just to be clear, moving the bridge project down the road allows us to do it without having a negative fund balance.
Correct.
But 5 years down the road, we still have $1 million left in our fund balance than we do if we don't make this decision.
Less. You're
Less.
correct. Absolutely.
It's
Yeah,
not,
this is coming
it's
out of
not
fund
like
balance.
we've saved money by moving that project.
No.
We still have to spend $1 million.
You're right.
I'm in favor of this project. It's a very tough decision to make. And I do think there's a lot of need for the safety of that area. And I do think, as John, as you said, that, had this been a decision presented to us with the right estimate, we probably would have come to this conclusion. Unfortunately, sometimes we don't have the time to retrack everything, especially, and I think George said it very well, especially it's not just us. We've got tremendous partners going to bat for us on this project as well, in the EOTC, being the city of Aspen and Snowmass, as well as the CDOT and all the work that you guys have done securing that grant. I'm not going to let it slide as an easy decision at all.
Steve?
I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Rob. Basically, it's the taxpayers who are paying for this, or the users. And I would urge that we see if we can get some money from the airport to help pay, because it is like an awesome entrance to the airport, the interface between the bus system and the airport. And I'd like to see a lot more people taking the bus to go to the airport and dragging their suitcases through the pedestrian underpass. The picture of the underpass reminds me of something, and I think it's in Central Park in New York City, that looks just like that I went through at one time, and it's beautiful. It's not like a little concrete box like has typically been put in for underpasses. This really is attractive enough that people would use it and be proud of it. And my gut feeling is we need to bite the bullet on this, and the cost estimate wasn't what we had, didn't pan out to be what it was said to be, but I think that we probably will save lives of one or more pedestrians who sooner or later are going to get killed trying to cross Highway 82 there. And I would also be in favor of that. I will not be at the EOTC meeting on Thursday because I have another commitment. So
We have a quorum
I'm
for that?
hoping that our partners in this
We do.
will. Yeah, you do have.
Michael.
You do have Michael supposed to be here. Is there any chance of getting more funding out of CDOT for this?
We can try. We have asked. They're not as nimble in moving money, but certainly there's maybe other ways that we can look for grant opportunities. This is a timing issue right now. Our backs are against the wall, and so from a short order standpoint, CDOT said, we've given you what we can do right now. But we can certainly look in the future and ask.
And this is, again, where Parsons had we had the proper estimate, we would have been asking for more money up front when CDOT would have been in a better position to maybe, not be nimble, but be, go through their deliberations the way they need to and possibly receive. But that opportunity is, passed us by. We're going to continue to work on other funding sources. Given the short decision timeframes, I think we want to present the worst case scenario and hope that it gets better, either through finding some savings during construction or finding alternative revenues. But on this short a notice, we couldn't promise either of those things with any confidence. And particularly the way our estimates have been going, we didn't want to put anything like that on the table.
So we'll present this again to the EOTC on Thursday. And again, I'm really hopeful that the city of Aspen and the town of Snowmass not only still recognize the importance of this project, but also recognize that they're not putting in any hard dollars. The county is putting in those hard dollars. We're just asking the EOTC to continue to contribute through the capital project fund that we all set up specifically for projects like this. So hopefully they'll see that reasoning.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What is the time of that meeting? I just didn't put it in my calendar.
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think we got a commitment that Michael would be there. I haven't heard back from him on his position, but I know Rachel was supportive of moving the project forward also.
All right, well, we have a little time. First of all, while we're in open discussion, anybody else? Do you have anything else on open discussion?
Yeah,
John?
just a couple items. First, you may have seen in the paper today that BOCC was selected to host 2 exchange managers from Thailand. Russ and I did step up and offer to have those managers shadow us at some different points throughout their visit here. So we'll be hosting those exchange managers. When they get here, more details to come. So that was in the paper. And just a quick note that I will be presenting on the history of Aspen tonight for the Aspen Historical Society, the least qualified person potentially in Pickens County.
Or a quick study, I
so.
guess.
Yeah. So we'll be having those discussions. I will need to be out of here to get over there at 5 o'clock. So
I think we can make that deadline.
That's all I have
5:30
for
at the
you.
Aspen Chapel, right?
Yeah, I need to be there so I can figure out what I'm saying.
Community church.
Community
Sarah,
church. The,
Community church.
yeah.
Other open discussion? None? Well, let's just backtrack. We have a little time, although there's just 3 of us here. Should we go fairly quickly? We just give an update on board reports. Rob,
I have
Northwest
nothing
Con?
new to report from that.
Nothing new, and Core, nothing new, and I think this is a pretty quick board report. We'll just push that off then. So with that, I think we're done for the day.
I could talk about a couple of things that I've been to,
Oh, I'm sorry.
and I don't know.
Oh,
the
CCI.
CCI, and then I also went to the Colorado Basin Roundtable, and I don't know if that's one of those acronyms on
Yeah, it is. Well, it's under the Intermountain, no, it's under the CRRTB, Colorado River Roundtable,
there. Okay.
1170.
Rachel and I both were at that meeting, and we were presented what is called the Basin Study, the short name for Colorado River Basin Water Supply and Demand Study. And the basic, that was very enlightening. Right now, the demand outweighs the supply for the water in the Colorado River. So we're already short on water. It's predicted there will be a 9% decrease in the total amount of water because of climate change over the next 50 years. And there will be a doubling of population in the Colorado River Basin. So there's going to be huge demands on the water that can't be met with our current system. It's estimated that the Colorado's allocation will actually be 2.7 million acre feet and not 3.8 million acre feet as is projected right now. And they gave as a take-home solutions that we need more urban and agriculture partnerships to come up with the shortfall of the water. We need to develop new reuse and conservation technologies and need to build and expand on existing partnerships for coming up with that water shortfall. And the second thing they talked about is this phase 2 study from the Colorado Water Conservation Board. And the phase 2 study basically says, what if all the conditional water rights are developed in Colorado? Then where's going to be the gap between the supply and demand? And so they're working on this right now. The phase 1 studied in the current situation, but if the 20% more water is sent over to the Front Range from the west slope, as it would be under phase 2, then what's going to be the condition of the river? And that phase 2 study will be out fairly soon, but it kind of comes to the same conclusion about the shortage of water. So it's it's a pretty scary prospect anyhow in terms of the water shortfall.
Steve, did you give a number, what the percent was that they're projecting at the beginning? Of what the shortfall would be, or what it would decrease as a result?
Well, they're saying that they're estimating a 9% decrease in the amount of water available just because of climate change. Doubling in population, 9% less water. So we need to change course on what we're doing. In terms of CCI, I don't think there's any like huge issues that are, I mean, a lot of the things are still in committees and or they've maybe gotten out of the House and they're in the Senate now. I have notes on a whole lot of them. Some interesting things that there's a bill that would charge a $30 annual fee for plug-in electric cars. Since they're not paying a fuel tax, they want to have some system for taxing them. There were different bills dealing with child welfare and with elder abuse issues. The governor's committed about $7.25 million to recommendations from the Elder Abuse Task Force. There's a ton of bills having to do with water, and the CCI is only tracking a couple of them actually, but the Colorado River Water Conservation District's tracking a whole bunch more of those. Gail Schwartz's bill that has to do with agricultural water rights. If somebody puts in measures to conserve water, her bill would allow them to leave their water in the river while still protecting their water right, and just let the water go down the river. The East Slope water interests are adamantly opposed to that. If the water's going down the river, they want to be able to nab it and take it over to the East Slope, basically is their contention. So her bill has next to no chance of passing. A bill died that interested me. It had to do with recycled energy, would include gas derived from waste materials. So you could get gas from a landfill and use it for generating electricity, for instance, and have that count as recycled energy. And that one died in, they call it PI'd, postponed indefinitely, is the term they use. And then, kind of an interesting thing, there are no bills out there yet having to do with the new marijuana laws that will be coming, but they're saying that there will be an omnibus bill coming forward instead of an omnibus bill. They're calling it an omnibus bill for the new marijuana laws projected to be coming forward, and they need to get something pretty quickly because it's by this summer that these new laws have to be in place. None have been presented yet. I think it's going to be a package deal that we'll hear about fairly soon. So.
All right, thank you. Okay, with that, I think we are ready to adjourn. Thank you, graduates.
Thanks, guys. I know that was